that was actually a perfect transition as we move into this idea of value propositions. And so again, this is another document that you can find in your linked resource document. It's also in the participant folder. So you can go ahead and access it there and kind of follow along with what I'll be unpacking in the next few slides. So the idea of value propositions for engagement continuity. So we're really going to lean into that last pillar of the framework, engagement continuity, because what we're finding is that can sometimes be one of your strongest your strongest sources for sustainability over the long term. And so let's talk a little bit about what is a value proposition. So value proposition is something that is used pretty heavily in the business world. A value proposition is a concise statement of beliefs or valuable outcomes of a product or service. So how we are using it for the residency space is thinking about it in terms of those partnerships, right? How can you offer a value proposition or a way that the residency model or your residency program offers a benefit to multiple partners or stakeholders in your institution? And so when we think about that, there's three different ways to think about it. And Sarah actually touched on two of them as she was kind of explaining one of the strategies that she's going to leverage to support sustainability over time. But the first one is a plan for making the residency mission and vision real and concrete to institutional partners. So really, thinking about how exactly, like how those stakeholders, the ones that make decisions in your higher education institution or your LEA, how can they have concrete experiences with the residency program itself? So thinking about how you might invite them on a clinical practice round, how you might invite them to engage the residencies themselves and engage with the residents themselves. Perhaps there's a professional development happening at the district and they can get in space with the residents. Anything you can do to make it concrete so that when they're at the opportunity where they are making that decision about the residency program, they've had that concrete experience. So really making and thinking about how can I make this residency program concrete to all stakeholders. A second consideration is an explanation of how a residency program might solve a partner's most urgent problem. So this is really thinking about how to position the residency program and the benefits of it to solve multiple problems that a stakeholder might have. So for example, one clear instance of this is human resources. Human resources are often dealing with teacher shortage issues, paraprofessional shortage issues. And if you can offer the residency program as a benefit or as a solution to those problems, over the long term, your human resources department begins to depend on that steady stream of teachers or paraprofessionals to address the shortages that they're experiencing. So really thinking about the stakeholders that you have and how you can position yourself for that benefit. How can you benefit what they might be dealing with? Again, a rationale for how partners might benefit from a residency program. And so thinking about that at the level of your institution and thinking about how you can position yourselves in that way. And so the document that was created by the lab has a column for IHE and LEA partners and has an example and that value proposition for each one of those stakeholders. And it's going to be different for your specific context. But we did want to give you those options, kind of give you the thoughts and kind of spark your interest in terms of what that might mean for your specific context. And so that's what value propositions are. I do want to share with you some of the offerings that are coming up, both from the lab and SRTAC. And so the first QR code there is the Equity Deep Dives happening in January. Our deep dive this time is Equity and Mentorship, Integrating Care and Culturally Responsive Mentorship into Residency Programs. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in engaging in a more kind of smaller community and really focused on culturally responsive mentorship and what that could look like at your site, that's something to look into. We have our second virtual Power Up happening January 27th. Again, that would be the second part to this focus and theme of sustainability, where we're really going to be focusing on funding. That happens in January. We have our regional site visits hosted by SRTAC. You can find information there. And then the last one there is the request for coaching link. So if you are someone that has, being engaged, is looking at the documents and feeling a little bit nervous and wondering how you can move on and take that next step, please request a coaching session with one of our SRTAC coaches or one of our residency lab coaches, and we can provide that one-on-one support. And we can take these documents to that next level and really look at them in space together. Okay, so at this point in the Power Up, we're going to have a panel discussion from a partnership that has really exemplified just that partnership as it looks to sustain its program. And I see some of our panel speakers have joined, so hopefully we can get them pinned. And so for this next panel discussion, we have invited San Juan USD and Alder University to speak a little bit about their partnership and to answer any questions that we may have regards to partnership and that aspect of their residency program. We have with us Nicole Corral, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Calais Eskridge, Alex Karam, and Natalie June. And I will let each of them introduce themselves.
I'm Calais Eskridge. I'm the teacher residency facilitator and the Alder can't speak this morning. Residency director for San Juan Unified School District. So I'm a clinical faculty technically for Alder, but I actually work for San Juan.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. And then Natalie June.
Good morning, everyone. Natalie June. I'm one of the regional managing clinical directors with Alder Graduate School of Ed. So nice to be with you all.
Thank you. And Nicole?
Hi, everyone. Nicole Cookrell. I'm the Director of Professional Learning and Curriculum, and I work for San Juan Unified. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time out to share with us a little bit more about your journey. We are going to start under the idea or theme of organizational sustainability, something we've all been talking about. And so my first question really is, how does your residency program partnership focus on processes rather than destination or that end product?
I think one of the things for us in terms of processes instead of destination is the idea. I noticed in some of the reading documents that you included for the panel today, that idea of continuous improvement. And I think that that's something that we just live every single day. This is our third year in the residency. Calais and I work really closely together to support the residency. And I think both of us are of the mind that we're always learning. We're always asking ourselves how we can do better, how we can support. Reviewing data is a really critical part of our journey. Talking with our residents, talking with our mentors, talking with our other partners within the district and also with Alder to figure out how we can just continue to improve supports for our residents and our mentors is something that I think we just live all the time, day to day. We couldn't do this work if we weren't just constantly in a place of learning.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole.
And I'll just add a couple things. This is definitely a true partnership. It started from when we first were bringing, just thinking about having a residency. That was early before I started. But once I came on board, when we think about what's the purpose of our residency and then how, this organizational sustainability, we certainly want to hire these teachers into our district, and we want them to reflect the community that they serve, and they do. About 70% of our residents are from within our district in some capacity, in terms of either they were classified staff, an instructional assistant, bilingual assistant, or they were guest teachers in our district. So we really are trying to bring in people who are already doing work in our district. I think when I think about the difference in our partnership, there's this mutual involvement in all aspects of the residency from the very beginning for recruitment, for our residents, our mentors, even program supervisors, everyone. We involve each other, we collaborate, we communicate effectively, we co-create resources, we created the processes, and we really listen to one another. when I think about this, it's not a Alder Graduate School of Education and San Juan. It's a them or an us. It's actually a we. We are in service of, hiring, creating and supporting effective teachers. And that happens across the system for both Alder and San Juan Unified. So those are some of the things I think about when processes it started from the very beginning and has continued over the last 3 years to really support our residents and as whole adults and in all aspects of their journey in our residency program and beyond. Once they are hired in San Juan, we really want to create this sense of belonging for our residents, that they feel that they understand what it means to be a teacher in San Juan, but also what it means to be an effective teacher in general. And that happens by having different ways to connect them to staff in our district and also with Alder.
I would agree. I would add that I really respect and appreciate, Calais, that you really leverage your relational capital. Clay's been working in her district for a very long time, she and Nicole, and they understand how important it is to build relationships, sustain those relationships in ways that really strengthens everyone's experience, not just the residents or the mentors, but all that are involved. Calais mentioned that sense of belonging. We see it. It's evident in the seminars that she holds every week, the conversations that she has with folks, be it school leaders, mentors, residents. And she's really focused on the journey. So like we all know where we want to get in terms of the destination, but I know these ladies really understand that in order for us to get there, that we need to be on this journey together, and we need to ensure that folks that are with us are well, that they're whole, that they're being taken care of, that we care about them deeply, and we do our best to also share that with one another as well too. Like I feel like my work with Nicole and Calais, we care about one another personally, on a personal level and a professional level, and that's what helps us sustain us. You need strong leaders that are going to be able to push this work forward in ways that feel meaningful and not just kind of in a transactional way. I guess what I'm trying to say is the work that we do, we know it's transformational work. And so we do our best to do that in ways that show that we care about one another, and be intentional about the work that we do, and in ensuring, like Nicole mentioned, we're learning, we're growing, but we're doing it together as a team. So I really appreciate that about this partnership.
Alex, do you want to add anything to that before we move on?
Yeah, I'll also do a quick introduction. I'm Alex
Yeah.
Karam. I work on the Alder team on strategy and partnerships. And I think I'll build on what Natalie and Clay were referencing around relationships. Is I think that all relationships are a journey and they're not a destination, and things change quickly. And when they change, we're in it together. And really it's navigating those relationships and helping us all. I think the other thing you just spoke to is the value prop, that we all hold a piece of why this is valuable, and the relationships really make that come to life.
That's wonderful. I want to kind of go back to something that Calais said, because I think it was so powerful when she was talking about, it's not a they and them partnership. It's really a we partnership, that you've come together as a group. I can tell just by the way that you're talking that part of that is just who you are as individuals. But could you unpack that a little bit more for perhaps some of those people in our community, in our audience today, that are struggling to find that we in the partnership? Are there specific, like concrete things that you could point to or indicate that really fostered that shared ownership of the residency program and like coming together for like the common goal of, positive implementation and effective implementation?
For me, it started in the onset. I really appreciate what Nicole added earlier around, us being learners and having that learners orientation. One thing I noticed about this particular partner in our working relationship is there was no ego. We kind of went into the partnership with, we are learning from one another and alongside one another. And I saw that very early on when we worked together to develop the job description for the director role. We worked together to work through what process are we going to use for selection for this role. They involved us as a partner during the interview process for the director. And then once we got Calais, we were cooking. And we were able to, we spent a lot of time together, right, Nicole? Those early stages together, we got to know each other really well. And that's how we built trust as well too. I think both partners understood, listen, you guys are just starting. and we've been doing this, Alder has for a little while. Can we offer this guidance to you? And the team has always been like, yes, please share. And then there were questions that we would have around, okay, but you tell us what makes the most sense for your district. And they would share with us, okay. And then we would put our heads together and we'd create resources and processes and make sure we got the right people on the bus. And then those check-ins, and I think we're really supportive. And I would say too, we hold each other accountable. Like we have enough relationship where we can ask each other questions about, okay, Nicole, can you tell me more about, or they say, okay, Nat, like I'm not sure about what this means. And so I was just thinking about how early on in our development, in our partnership, those moments and those times really help to lay that foundation for our relationship. And we've done our best to continue to cultivate that over time through our check-ins, through accountability, our impact report meetings we have once a year, the PLP meetings we have, once a year. We're constantly looking at data together, or things that come to mind. What's coming up for y'all?
Nicole, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think, everything that Natalie said is spot on. I do feel like this partnership and this residency program has really been co-created with Alder at our side. Like we have worked arm in arm, from working on grant funding to setting up the program. And as Natalie mentioned, hiring even Calais, and Alder supported us with the mentor hiring and just so much. Of course, they also support us with recruiting. Like it's just like we do everything together. And I think something else that has helped with the we that Calais can also speak a little bit more about. I mean, certainly Calais' position is a huge benefit because she really bridges that learning between what our residents are getting in their coursework with Alder and what we are seeing in clinical practice. Like she is that person that brings those two things together. And in addition to that, our district staff supports this program and is involved in this program. So we have staff that provides program supervision for our residents. We have San Juan staff that teaches some coursework. Right now, tomorrow, one of our ELA TOSAs is teaching a literacy course that our residents take. So we embed San Juan and Alder into the DNA of this program, and both play an equal role, which really helps, I think, build that idea of we. So, and Calais, you are that bridge, so you may want to speak more to this as well.
Well, thank you. I'll just add that when I think about that, I am a clinical faculty, so I teach coursework. So I teach the seminar and the fieldwork courses. For residents, I meet with them 3 times a month. And then for mentors, I coach and support them in a mentor seminar monthly. And so I also get weekly support with all the clinical faculty, all the directors across the state. For California, we have a clinical faculty meeting weekly on Wednesday afternoons. So we can calibrate and talk about timely topics that are happening. Natalie June is the regional manager for the clinical faculty for the Central Valley and Central Coast. And so we meet on a bi-monthly meetings, or sooner, or weekly if we need to. So as a needs basis. So those are some other things that I think about, that I get support to really do the work that I do. Also push in classrooms. I provide 5 observations across the semester for this term alone. And I work closely with our principals so that they can get in and see our residents. So pretty proud of the fact that I have 100% of principals who go in and see our residents 2 times in the fall and 2 times in the spring, which is difficult to do. And part of that is using the relationships that I have with those on-site administrators to really encourage them to get in and work in partnership to observe our residents so they can speak to who they are and get to know them, and of course hire them if they have a position at their school site. So there's some other ideas about that.
Can you just add quickly too, Heather? I was just thinking as you were sharing, Calais, I love the way you and Nicole invite us into your space. I love when I get those emails and those text messages. We're like, hey, the governor's here today, or hey, this resident is on the news today, and let me show you this picture of what's going on in seminar today, or, hey, Alder, can y'all come join us for this event or that event? Like that's how we build those relationships and that collaboration, that sense sense of we is we do our best to invite one another into our different spaces and work. So we have this shared understanding of what it means to really be in partnership with one another. But I just wanted to add that those moments, it just really makes a big difference for me.
One more thing to add is I think of the intentionality about the infrastructure on both sides. So we were just talking about that engagement sustainability piece. And I think that San Juan has been very intentional, one about Calais, who she is, who they hired for Calais' role, but then all the people who are there to support her and how to open doors on the San Juan side. Similarly, on the Alder side, being very intentional about the supports that she has access to, so that when she has a question or when she needs to navigate someone, she has somebody she can go to on the Alder side. So it's this beautiful like keystone in the middle of the bridge that has the infrastructure below it to try to help the partnership, all the things that they just spoke to, become the we.
If I can add to that, something that you said, Alex, just made me think this in terms of the intention. One of the early decisions that was made at the beginning of this partnership was to move the oversight of it from our human resources department to my department. And that was a really intentional decision for exactly what Alex is describing. In my role, I oversee professional learning, curriculum, teacher induction, and also our peer evaluation. And so it was a really perfect opportunity to intentionally build those bridges. Like, we have the folks that understand the curriculum and content piece that can support in those ways. We have our induction team that can step in and meet our residents before they're hired into the district, because they're going to be providing the support. So being in this department allows Calais access and our residents access to staff that they may not have had easy access to had it been under the HR umbrella. And that being said, HR is still very much a critical partner. We need them. We involve them in everything we do. They just don't have the role of primary oversight of the program for the reasons that Alex described.
Wonderful. So it sounds like, kind of like what Alex was saying, it sounds like, you've picked your two coordinators on at both institutions, but they have a lot of like scaffolding and structure to support their roles. One of the things that I heard in addition to that was how San Juan is embedded in Alder and Alder is embedded in San Juan. So there's a lot of ownership. Everyone's been invited to both spaces and there's ownership across institutions. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit, Nicole, you mentioned this, well, several of you mentioned this, of how involved these other stakeholders are in the residency model. Were any of you around when those conversations were first had, and how were those conversations first broached? What advice would you give someone that's trying to make those connections and just hasn't glued yet, or how would you first start to broach some of those topics, or how would you elicit that support where someone hasn't engaged yet, I should say?
I was not around at the very beginning. Natalie was, so I feel like I want to make sure I will defer to her to talk about the onset of that partnership.
Mm-hmm.
I will say one of the lessons that we've learned since the partnership has gotten in place was I think what a miss that we had in San Juan was to not involve our Teachers Association as intimately as they are involved now at the very, very onset of this partnership. I think that would have made things go a little bit smoother at the very beginning, and also kind of throughout. Our Teachers Association is also a really critical partner. They are very supportive. They have done a lot of things and negotiated for a lot of things that very much support the residency. So I don't want to make it sound like they're not supportive. They certainly are. But I think we had some hiccups along the way because they weren't part of it at the very beginning. But other than that, I feel like I'd want to pass it to Natalie to talk about how those conversations first began, because neither Calais nor I were a part of those.
Yeah, I think actually, Julie, who was unable to make it today, was really a key teammate who initiated a lot of those partnerships conversations, which typically begins with senior leadership with our partners, really getting clarity around how our mission and vision align, and getting on the same page around our MOUs and such. And so and it's years, like she takes years to really cultivate that relationship and ensure that alignment. So both partners can be really clear about what we want to do and accomplish together. I think what I wanted to speak to actually was how you all continue to engage those stakeholders. Even when I say you, I'm thinking about Nicole and Calais. I think you all are very intentional with your board, very intentional with your superintendent, your other senior leaders. You mentioned Barry, with the union, you mentioned HR, induction, and I've been a part of some of those conversations, but the ladies are very, very intentional. And I think about Calais' communication. It's, she works really hard on it, and maybe she's like, oh, just my little newsletter, but it's really not like the newsletter that she works on when has clear data on how those goals that we said we were going to accomplish together are actually tracking throughout the residency year. I think that helps. I think it's one thing to have those initial conversations, as you mentioned, Nicole, at the onset. And I think it's something different when you have these accountability measures throughout our time together where they're saying, actually, yeah, we are on track and we are making progress toward what we said we were going to accomplish together. So that's a couple things that come to mind.
I love the idea of that newsletter. That sounds like a great place to communicate just what's happening in the residency space. Another touch point with the people that are involved, right? Your other stakeholders that are involved. We are going to switch gears for a second and think about that funding. Think about funding for a second. Can you all speak to how does your program evaluate and seek out potential funding sources? And Nicole, I think we'll start with you again, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we did again early on was go to cabinet because we knew that we needed some additional funding because we do have the CTC implementation grant. But given the timing of the grant and given just the cost of the program, we knew we would need some additional funding. So, a couple of years ago when the residency was kind of up and running and shortly after we received the initial round of implementation funding that we're currently using, Diana Marshall and I went to cabinet. She was previously in HR and our contact. And we just said, here's the budget, here's how much it's going to cost, here's what the grant funds, but here's where we have some gaps. And cabinet at that time made a decision to use our LCFF funding to support the program. We're using specifically supplemental dollars because this program directly lines up with the goals that we have for our unduplicated student groups, our English learners, low income, foster youth, and homeless, to support workforce diversity and making sure that our students who attend schools where there are high rates of unfilled positions are having access to high quality teachers. And so that was a decision that we made because of the goals that this program really, reached for, and it aligns certainly with the goals of that funding. And we also had some conversations about potentially using educator effectiveness funds if we needed additional sources of funding, specifically to support our mentors. Educator effectiveness funds are a little tricky because they are, you can't use them on pre-service teachers, but we can use them for mentoring and support. So that's kind of where we have used the funds if we've needed to, and we needed a little extra supplemental funding for whatever reason. So at this point, we haven't been in a position where we've had to seek out additional sources of funding because the funding that we've been offered through our district has been enough to help us sustain the program thus far. Should we be in a position at some point where we have to look for other sources of funding, I think number one, we have to look at what are the goals of the program and what are the parameters of the funding, and do those things align? And then also I would say, is the funding source one time or ongoing would be another question that we have to answer, because ideally we're putting this into ongoing sources of funding so that the program can sustain. If we simply fund the program through one-time sources, once those sources of funding run out or expire, we can no longer support the program. So, really, I think it was a really strategic and wise decision at the get-go to support our program through ongoing dollars with those LCFF supplemental funds.
I love how you kind of framed your response in regards to that, sustainability in terms of the one-time funding or something that's more consistent over the long term. That's a question that I think a lot of programs are going to also have to ask themselves. And then also the great point that you brought up is thinking about the objectives and goals of your specific program and what funding could potentially match those goals so that it would be an easy connection for people that are making the decisions around that funding to
Mhm.
make, right? If that's something that's a clear connection that they see, they're more in a position and you're more in a position to be awarded the money.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's tempting to look at an available bucket of money and say, like, let's see if we can tap into that. And I think that sometimes that can work in, dire circumstances. And you just have to be aware of what you're doing, because if that bucket of funding has parameters that make you compromise parts of your program, then the program may not actually achieve the goals you want it to achieve. So it's really like, I think that alignment, while it's difficult, and we are in a position now where we're losing all this one-time funding, we're having to make cuts in our district, like we're having those same conversations that you all probably are who are working at the LEA level. It's kind of a frightening circumstance to be in that position, but if you can have that alignment between this is what the funding is for and these are the goals of the program and they match, it means that you also don't have to compromise your values. You don't have to compromise the work you're doing. And that is also going to breed a successful program, which is then going to open doors for more potential funding, right? So success begets success. I think that's kind of our frame of mind in this work.
That's a great point. I saw you nodding your head, not nodding your head, Natalie. Do you want to add anything to what, no?
I would just add to one of the other sources of funding that we have is the classified staffing grant. I know I can't speak widely, at least I know Nicole can, but one of the barriers that, especially because we're bringing in residents that potentially already worked in our district, was that they wouldn't have benefits. And so we've been able to use the classified staff grant to supplement that. So for the employee only, but be able to have benefits, offer benefits to them for the year of the residency. And I know that many of our residents have shared that has been beneficial, and one of the reasons why they chose to go into, to apply for our residency.
So that allowed you to offer something that was equally advantageous. Like when they were comparing staying in the classroom as a paraprofessional or moving into the residency program, that was like the additional thing that you could offer them. That's wonderful.
Well, and that's the data that we were getting, is that our residents were like, the stipend's nice, but I need health benefits. So
Yeah.
that was something that was a decision that was made directly because that's what our potential residents were advocating for.
Right. And that's something, again, just to remind our audience, is that it's very contextual, whatever parameters your residency program is supporting are going to really depend on those next steps and where you're going to draw funding and what it's going to look like for your specific context. I want to move into kind of a different topic in terms of the value proposition that I shared towards the end of the last part of our session. I was wondering if you all could share a little bit about how you sell the program to potential partners, mentors, or even as you're recruiting residents in the community. How do you position yourself, and how do you sell? What perhaps value proposition would you use for that? Alex, do you want to start?
I was going to kick it over to Calais because I feel like Calais is constantly doing this work and does it really well. So Calais, come on.
Sure. Well, Natalie and I had a conversation actually before this meeting because we were, really trying to calibrate, and think about some of the questions that were going to come up. And we talked about this value, kind of selling the program. We are a big district, so part of it is recruitment within the district and recruitment efforts with Alder's recruiter, Dwayne Ewing Jr., who works closely with our HR directors and staff to do the recruitment through recruitment information meetings, things like that. But really, we really tried to uplift the voices and use data to sell our program. Data comes in, like Natalie said, in our newsletter. Data comes to talking to our stakeholders. Results matter. Results count. And we definitely use the relationships to reach out to mentors, to principals, in thinking about making the resident and mentor match. We want to make sure we have what they need, and that our mentors see that there's a benefit in terms of that they're going to we leverage this co-teaching model. How can you leverage the power of 2 teachers in the classroom for a whole year? We also, use things, help them understand I'm talking about mentors, specifically that they will have their resident for before the school year starts. They'll be able to help set up the classroom and start the school year with them and attend professional development or staff development at the school site level, meet the staff. And then they will also end the school year with their mentor at the teacher staff work day. So I think those are the things we do. We want them to see that's mutual beneficial for them as mentors to continue to grow as an educator. And it will obviously impact our students and their learning as well. So those are some of the things I think about when we sell the program. It's about might they get out of it? How will students benefit? And how does the staff at the school benefit? How are families going to benefit? And then also with our principals, making sure that they're, again, get in to see their residents so they can see how they grow over time, where they started, and be able to provide that feedback as well. Lastly, I would say that principals, we also survey them through Alder's, through Alder. And we also invite our principals in to our Alder resident evaluation meetings, which are 3 times a year. So we invite them at least into one of them because we know their schedules are very busy, but we want them to understand here's what the residents, how they're self-reflecting around the teacher performance expectations. That actually aligns right with our system of professional growth, which is our evaluation system in our in San Juan. So they're doing similar work already as pre-service teachers. So when they come into our program, they already understand what that might look and sound like. So those are some things I thought about.
2 things I'd add. One is just the data sharing that happens between San Juan and Alder. So we have the MOUs, but really it's the ability to know where residents are, how they're progressing, where might they be hired, how long are they staying, and that sharing of data makes it possible for both of our organizations to tell the value proposition, to sell, to share the impact. And then I think the other thing that I really want to call out is that over time, like what Nicole was saying, quality begets more quality, and the word of mouth really, really helps with principals already knowing, mentors already knowing, mentors having seen another mentor have a resident at the school, a resident getting hired, and then 3 years later becoming a mentor themselves. So I do think that there's sort of this flywheel of momentum that starts to build through a quality program.
Absolutely. When you were saying word of mouth, Alex, I was thinking the program begins to sell itself, which is so wonderful. And this question is really related to your earlier question, Heather, around process rather than destination, to me, at least, because, since Calais is so customer service, oriented, and she, again, really works hard to ensure that people are happy and whole and well. They're going to speak highly of their experience with Calais and with Nicole, and they're going to recommend people to Alex's point around word of mouth. And I don't underestimate that. Like, that word spreads very quickly, and that's why Calais has mentors that want to return to the mentor role and work with her year after year, because they know how deeply she cares. They know that they're going to be supported. She's going to feed them. Okay, they're going to act together. They're going to have a good time. But those things matter. Those things matter. And I was thinking too, Calais, when you were sharing earlier, and when she and I were talking earlier, I want us to do more work around this, but really the impact of leveraging 2 teachers in the classroom and how that really is beneficial and impactful for our TK-12 students. Like, we can't speak to that enough, because, we're here because we want to do right by our kids, and to have another adult that wants to do right by our kids as well too, and to be able to leverage 2 people in one classroom to have that impact it's amazing. We have so many mentors that when they finish the program, they're like, I miss my resident, I miss an extra pair of hands. And many of them are able to now speak to how much growth that they've seen from their TK-12 students because of the work that they've done with Calais. So I wanted to share that as well.
Thank you, Natalie and Alex and Calais. I also just wanted to talk on this communication piece and how do you engage different partners in this work. In my role, I'm more at the system level, right? So I'm like cabinet, board, etc. And I think when Alex talked earlier about the data sharing, I cannot tell anybody in this room how valuable that is. Like, it is incredible. Calais and I did our first board update this year to our Board of Education about the program, and having that data at our fingertips where we could talk about, this is how many teachers, how many residents we've had in these credential types. This is what our retention rate is. This is this is how our residents match our student demographics. Like, this is where we're strong. This is where we have growth areas. Like, having that data at our fingertips and not having to go and like piece it together and dig around for it helped us tell a very compelling story to our board, where they were like, well, what do you need to expand this program? Like, they were very curious about it. They were very supportive of it. And we had, I think, the same response when we took the presentation to our curriculum and standards board advisory committee just a few weeks ago. So like, being able to tell that story to different partners have different needs, right? Our mentors' needs for communication are very different than our Board of Education. And when we have the tools at our fingertips to be able to tell the story to the group that we're communicating with that's most meaningful to them, it just helps us tell a really comprehensive, complete story about this program that allows us to continue doing this amazing work. Because at the end of it, we all believe so deeply in this program. And I think that that also helps it go, because we just are incredibly invested in it.
Those were some wonderful points. I loved how, like, thinking back to the value proposition document that was shared by the lab earlier in the presentation, just thinking about the different ways that you just shared, that you made, your residency program more concrete to the stakeholders that you were in front of, whether those stakeholders were the board of directors that you just mentioned, or the mentors, or the residents themselves, really making that concrete and explicit. And then also thinking about, again, I think what Alex said about, how can that specific stakeholder benefit from a residency program, and positioning yourself in that way as well. So excellent examples of that. Can you give me an example of how your program design is responsive to the needs of your community? And this is for perhaps newer people that are, applying for that capacity grant, or had just been newly awarded an implementation grant. What are some things to think about as you embark on this first iteration of implementation? What would you say to that?
I mean, first of all, we need to make sure that we are hiring in the areas that we've determined are high needs, right? So that's like one of the major ways that we're responsive to the needs of our community, is making sure that, that we're filling the right vacancies, and that we are asking for the right positions and recruiting the right residents. So that's been one piece, just at a system level. I think from kind of the ground level, in terms of being responsive, Calais can talk about how she gets data from our residents, our principals, our mentors, and how we continue to adjust how we implement the program so that it meets their needs. So Calais, I'll pass it to you as well.
Okay. Yeah, when thinking about being responsive to the needs of our to residents, we try to have a whole adult approach. They are graduate students in a program that is pretty quick. By the time that I see them in the summer, they take a third of their coursework, and then they'll finish in June. So June to June is quick. So they have very different kinds of needs, whether that be needs, mental and social, mental health needs, for example. This is a pretty stressful program. So I can connect them to resources there. Perhaps they're falling behind in coursework, so there's that kind of support that they might need. Also, in thinking about, we try to do our best in meeting the needs of matching the resident and mentor pair, but sometimes some of those things are limited. While we're a big district, when we think about science, for example, single subject science or math, there's a lot of factors that play a role in how we can match them. One, obviously, we want a mentor who's willing to open up their classroom, but they have to have a matching credential, but it can't just be a matching credential. They also have to be teaching that subject area for the majority of their time that they're teaching that school year. So things like biology, for example, we had a bio resident earlier this year, and we had to find one who has some biology credential, but also are they teaching that? And they were on a block schedule. And that particular mentor that we did match with also holds other credentials. So they're needed at their school for anatomy, physiology, and other things. So there's a lot of considerations there. We do want to have pockets of residents at the same school. So we also did some strategic recruiting, especially last year when we had more multiple subject residents coming in for this current cohort. We were trying to not, we were strategic in who we tapped into at specific school sites they already had mentors at, and really recruited within there so that we aren't spread thin. With the 20 residents we currently have, they're at 14 different schools. So there's that as well. So we're responsive to the needs of principals saying, yes, I want more residents at our school site. So we take that into consideration as well. I'm not sure if there was other things. If there's anything else to add, Natalie, please do, or Alex.
Well, you shared a lot of great things, Calais. I was also just thinking about, you named some already, some of the proactive ways. I know we're talking about how to be responsive to the needs of the community, and you do a great job of getting that street data from classified staff and otherwise. I think you're also really intentional about being proactive. So like when I hear you talk about how you're intentional about matching, how you're intentional, about clustering mentors and residents in schools. Those are proactive approaches. And additionally, you're also really good about increasing your visibility. That's one thing I learned as a school leader, right? Is like, you got to be out in the classrooms, on the playground, in the cafeteria, and you do a great job of ensuring that you're present, you're visible, you're approachable, so people can come talk to you when they have specific needs. And you and I have not navigated lots of challenges, to your point, be it a mental health challenge, be it emotional support that's needed. Sometimes it's academic needs, as you mentioned before. Sometimes there's organizational skills. Sometimes residents are just like, how do I juggle everything? And, I love that you have so much experience in your belt, Calais, personally, as a mom, as a partner, as someone that's been in school, someone that's worked in the district a really long time. Like, you can give, and you do give, lots of practical also experience around, this is how you make it work. This is how you balance work and life, and this is how you do X, Y, Z. So those are just some of the things that came to mind as well.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you for those responses. I do want to, at this time, allow our participants to ask any questions they may have. I see someone in the chat asked if you could share your board presentation with us. And so thank you, Nicole, for that. I can send that out in the follow-up email that we have. But does anyone else have any questions for our participants, or excuse me, our panelists? You can unmute or you can put them in the chat, either way.
Hi, this is Ed Honowitz with the CDE Foundation, and welcome, and great work out there. I was just wondering if you had some thoughts. San Juan is a fairly large school district, and thoughts on how you might contextualize this for smaller districts that have maybe less staffing capacity and fewer employees overall.
So yes, we are a large district, but really when you think about the amount of people who do the kind of day-to-day work around the partnership, it's Calais who does most of the daily, and then me. And yes, we have HR, we have our teachers association. I think, it's really hard to answer that without knowing your specific structure. So I feel like maybe if there's a particular challenge that you're facing that we could help with, I'd be happy to hear more. But I'm not sure how to answer your question fully, if that makes sense.
One bit.
I know you're probably already lean and mean, but I'm thinking about smaller districts in relation to the ability to sustain the program in relation to the committing to staffing and things along those lines.
Yeah, I don't know, Natalie and Alex, do you guys have some examples of smaller districts you work with? Because San Juan is all I've known. I've only worked in San Juan, so I feel like I want to pass it to Natalie and Alex.
So I'll start with the Alder model generally operates on this idea of a cohort of around 20 to 25 residents. And there are some districts that say, hey, we need to hire 25 residents. San Juan's one of them. Like, we need to hire 20 residents. We need to hire 20 teachers a year at least. We would like them to come to the residency model. For those districts that maybe have a lower hiring need, or they can't necessarily find mentors for or recruit a level 20, they form combined cohorts. And then what that allows Alder to do is that we share tuition dollars revenue with our partners in order to hire the role, that clinical director role, which is Calay's role, which then allows there to be a dedicated staffing at that, maybe it's a combined cohort at that cohort level, and help navigate across all those systems and similar partnership. That would help with staffing, but then just naming that it is really important to have a champion like Nicole on the administration of every district, because they know how to navigate, to her point, board, cabinet, board, district superintendent, and put pieces together, which then allows the clinical faculty role to really focus on residents and principals and mentors and helping really get that drumbeat of the program going.
I would agree. I think some of the challenges that we've noticed with smaller districts is it's a little more difficult to recruit mentor teachers or find enough highly qualified teachers to mentor. I think another challenge our smaller districts run into is also their hiring needs are a little bit different. And so that model of, like Alex was explaining, of 23 to 25, they may not even have that many vacancies that following year. And so that combined cohort model that Alex was describing has been a really supportive model for some of our smaller districts. It helps with that mentor recruitment need, as well as the hiring as well. And money, of course.
Those are great responses. We had, let's see, we had another question. Well, there was one question about residency programs that were smaller. We have one in here. I'm part of a smaller district, 9 schools, PK through 8. We have 4 residents this school year and have hired them as classified employees. I did inform the residents that we may not have positions available next school year, but they can take their SPED credential to one of our neighboring districts and be ready to start off the year fully trained.
Heather, I also saw a question in the chat about maybe asking for more details about how we matched the biology resident. So would you like us
Go
to?
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to pass that one to Calais because she was working on that last year.
So we had residents at 3 of our high schools already. I think we have 9 high schools total. So we initially recruited reached out to those specific teachers who taught biology last year, and asked if they would be interested in being a mentor so that we could continue to have more than one resident at that school site. We certainly looked at the credential that they held, and again, the particular mentor that we matched our biology resident with held more than one credential, biology and something else, a couple other ones. I specifically reached out to the site administrators because that mentor doesn't always teach biology only. They teach other subject areas. And first, were they willing to be a mentor? And they were, and they applied. And second, if we were going to match them, they needed to be teaching biology for majority, and they're on a block schedule. So 3 of their 4 classes needed to be teaching, or 2 of the 3 classes they would be teaching needed to be about biology. And they accommodated, once we chose that person as a mentor, they accommodated the schedule and worked their master schedule so that the resident would have the experience they needed in teaching biology for the majority of the school year. So that's kind of how we looked at it. One year the first year we had a resident who had an undergraduate degree in physics. They wanted to teach physics and get a credential in physics, and we could not find the match. Instead, that resident ended up they were willing to get a math credential, which they had a lot of experience with that. And then we worked with Alder specifically to help that resident. All they needed was a methods course for science, for physics, or for science in general. And they took that towards the end of the program, and they ended up being able to have them apply for dual credentials. So they received a credential in both math and physics, and that I can tell you made that resident very desirable in hiring, because those are both high needs in our area. So that's another way in which we match specifically for single subject like science.
This is kind of related to, I think it was Ed's question too. Just briefly, we have started to explore on a small scale, and this could support with smaller districts or those high need areas where you don't have a lot of mentors that are available. We started to explore 2 residents to 1 mentor. And so there are some logistical things to work out there, but that has been a model that we have tried. I used it when I was a director as well too. You just have to be really strategic about some logistical things, but that's another approach.